Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of Learning Curves. Today, I'm here with Havilah Vangroll, and she is a
human capital management consultant.
Yes, I'm like, what exactly does a human capital management consultant do?
It's really a terrible title. I gotta admit, it's a terrible title. I mean, so is like chief people officer. Like, again, they're just all bad when it deals like HR, even human resources. I mean, it's a terrible name. Like, we have to come up with better terms. I've seen polls, nobody's quite managed to do it yet. So
yeah, it's hard to get in that one word.
So there's where we are. We're at human capital management. So basically what that means is I help companies with their people processes, processes that involve their people in bringing them in and hanging on to them and what happens when they leave. And then what all of that has to do with that. So it's people processes, which is kind of fun when you make that an alliteration, but that's the crux of it is people. Not so much in the HR sense that it's not payroll and all that. It's actually the connection piece. It's the human piece of the people processes in your companies that I work with.
I think that is so needed right now in corporate America, and honestly for any of business. People management, I feel, is one of, as a business owner, I know that I probably struggled with that the most. And talking to several other business owners that I know, a lot of times when we have our meetups and we talk about our big challenges, our biggest challenges are always when we talk about our people. And, so worried about somebody that might be leaving, or just our processes aren't aligned correctly. And all those things become this major issues that cause businesses so many problems. So how do you help solve those?
Well, all those problems cost you money.
Yes.
Right? And at the end of the day, we're all in business to make money. We want to grow our revenues. We want to increase our profits. We want to be able to keep in business. And we'd like to make a little money along the way. So, but without people, we have no companies, particularly once you get to a certain point. And we all start out in small little companies. It's just you and the world. And then it's, you against the world. And then it grows into like you and a few people. And then you get past that few people point, and it's no longer you in charge of everything. It's now having to delegate into other things and allow release of some of those task responsibilities and leadership. And I think when you're going from a micro small business into a medium-sized business, I think that's one of the biggest growing pains for leadership is letting go of that day-to-day knowledge of what everybody's doing all the time and being a single point of failure for decisions, where all the decisions were coming back to your desk, and now you're having to allow other people to make decisions in your business that could impact you. You're still at the strategic level. You're still looking at the bigger picture. You're still picking what goes forward, but those day-to-day things you're letting go of. And I think for a lot of people, that's a little scary. Mm-hmm. And so for my really small companies that are going into that next level, who are going from that 20, 30 person into that 50, 100, 150 person range, that's where you really have to have systems and processes in place that not only get you there, but allow you to scale past that. And if you set them up correctly at the beginning, it makes life a lot easier going forward. Now, if you're already at that 100, 150 range and you're like, I don't have any processes and it's a total mess and we really don't know and everybody hires their own people the way they want to and there's no centralization to it.
Oh, no.
No panic. It's okay. I went into a company that had over almost 200,000 people worldwide. They were a multi-billion-dollar government contractor.
Wow.
I spent 5 years with them, with a small team that I was part of, and we built their regional recruiting centers. And we did it because every hiring manager was doing their own thing. Nobody had any system. There was no tracking. And in government contracting, there's a lot of compliance issues you have to do.
There's a lot of compliance issues.
So many compliance issues.
Yes.
And nobody was doing that. So they had tried these recruiting centers before and they had failed because they hadn't built trust relationships they hadn't brought the right people in and they hadn't built trust relationships.
Right.
So one of the very first things we did was we had to build the system that they would all buy into. It had to be simple. It had to be straightforward. It had to be streamlined. And it had to make sense for every piece of the organization we were supporting, not just one part of it or one hiring manager. So it was taking what they all liked and boiling it down into a really effective process. It took us 5 years.
Yeah,
and
I would think so.
Well, they also reorged 4 times, and it was one of
Well,
these companies.
especially because if you have a process that you're putting in place and you
Yes.
have to get the buy-in from all the
Yes.
different departments that
And they
had to-
did. By the end, they were 100% bought in. That particular
That's really
division that we were
impressive.
supporting was 20% of the size of the company. It was 20% of the company. We did 80% of the revenue in that company. And I'm like, we're a huge company. So like we were stable. All of our processes stayed. We did 4 massive reorgs, and we were still able to hire and retain people because we had these processes in place for these managers and for this division. So it's taking that same idea at the very beginning. So I'm actually working with a small startup right now. And he hasn't even hired his first person. He's building his entire product right now on interns, which are brilliant. But he has no employees at the moment. But I'm like, when you start hiring people, we have to have these processes in place because you want to, at the rate that you want to scale at, you have to be ready to absorb that level of people.
Right.
And he has a beautiful, it's done in Figma and it's gorgeous and it's this whole journey session and it's beautiful. And I'm like, this is great. And it's so pretty on paper. And then we're going to add people. And guess what? It's going to get really ugly.
Yes, it does.
It's going to get not ugly. It's going to get messy because people are messy. People are just messy. Like they just make things messy. So it's like it's a beautiful laid out, journey, and it's gorgeous.
Everything looks so good on the paper.
Yes, and then we add humans.
Yes.
And it's like, and then add water and watch it blow up, right?
Right.
Yeah. So and then add human and see what happens. So if we have processes that prepare us for the messiness that comes with humanity, it gives us the structure to be able to deal with the unexpected without panic, right? That's really what structure is about, is creating the opportunity so that you can deal with whatever comes, regardless, you know what to expect next. Like, okay, we did this, so it's an if this, then that. Okay, we're at that now. That was not where we wanted to be, but that's where we are, but we know how to deal with it now because we have a process in place. We know. And it's not just one person knows. The whole company knows what to expect. So every hiring manager, everybody involved in the hiring process, everybody involved in employee retention knows what the process is, who to talk to, who's responsible, who's the chain of command in decision making, because that's a big piece of it too, is decision making. I see we can go back to that, but yes. I see a lot of processes fall down and trip on themselves over decision making or lack thereof. So that's kind of what that was a very long explanation, but really what I do is I help create hiring processes that bleed into retention processes, that bleed into transition processes or plans. And what transition planning is when someone leaves, what happens? How do you extract their corporate knowledge? How do you pass on their work? How do you make sure you don't burn out the people that are left? And how do you make sure you get them replaced quickly? Whether that's being promoted, because that's a transition too, or they choose to leave voluntarily, or you've had to ask them to leave. Those all happen.
Yes,
it's
they do.
just the fact of business. If you have a standardized plan to deal with that, it eliminates a lot of the rumors, the chaos, and the concern that happens around those things. Well, what happens now? Am I going to have to do their work too, and my work? And
yeah,
do you know what I mean? Like
right.
you stop the story.
The water cooler talk. It's very loud when they know that something's about ready to happen.
And so it just stops. It stops the story, and it says, "This is the narrative that we do. This is how this company deals with these transitions. When they're hard, when they're easy, when they're exciting, when they're scary. We have a plan.
Yeah,
we know what to do." And that is it's those processes that build real culture in a company.
I think it settles everybody down quite a bit, because you're right, it gets really stressful because they're thinking, oh my gosh.
Well, am I next? Well, what's going to happen?
Yeah, am I next? Or it's the other thing, or, I'm going to have to take on the work.
Yep, that too.
They're not replacing anybody. This is going to, now we're all going to have to work a lot harder.
Right. And I'm not getting a raise, and I'm doing everybody else's work now. And I mean, I've heard it all. Like, I've heard all the rumbly jumblies,
Yes.
Because for a long time was a recruiter, so I was on the receiving end of, why are you leaving? Well, we've lost 4 people. They've not replaced them. I'm doing the work of 3 people. I'm working 60 hours. I don't ever go home. Like, I just can't do this anymore. I need a better quality of life.
Right.
That's a big one. Burnout is it's a big topic in business right now. It's a big topic in human capital. It's a big topic in HR. Burnout. We've asked people to run hard and fast for a long time. We threw the whole COVID thing in the middle of it, and people went, wait, I get a different option? And now we're like, hey, let's go back to the office and try and reinvent 2019. And everybody's like, no, I'm not interested. Can't do that.
Yeah, I know.
So it's
I took the approach of I'm just downscaling and holding back from doing all that because I'm actually, quite honestly, afraid of hiring again and going through all that. But probably because I never had
a process.
a process in place that made me fail every time. And the biggest thing was, not every time, but I always know that the panic that would set in when you either had to let somebody go or somebody decided to go, and then rushing to find that next person, maybe not taking the right time to vet the right and there's all these things that just happen with the bad decision making when it comes along with that.
And sometimes sometimes the leaving can be stopped before it happens if we start having conversations sooner with our employees. If we have that communication connection quicker, and instead of, I've heard it a couple places in the industry right now, they're talking about stay interviews. Rather than having exit interviews, have stay interviews. Every 3 months, sit down and say, what's working? What's not? What else could be happening? Where do you feel supported? Where do you not feel supported? Are you ready to grow? Are you feeling stagnated? What can we do to help you get where you want? What are your goals right now? Just having those kind of conversations heads off a lot of that. And we were talking earlier about younger employees and that you just feel like you get them up and running and trained and ready to go, and they exit. Why do they do that? Well, they do that because now they're ready for the next level, and the company they're with isn't giving them that. They have to leave to go find that. So if you have younger employees who are coming and you're pouring a lot of training and time and effort into them, one of the things you do is part of the onboarding process, which is a big piece of your retention, it's not a 3 or 6 month process. It is a 12-month process. You check in regularly. How are you feeling? Are you feeling like, well, I'm ready for more. I don't want more. I'm overwhelmed. Like, whatever that is, you're checking in with them. And, hey, what would be your next opportunity? If you could write your next job description, I used to ask candidates, if you could write your own job description, what would it look like right now? What would the job be that you want to do? And see if they're even in alignment with what they're working on. Because if they're not, now you got the heads up that you either got to find somewhere else for them in the company, or you better be recruiting.
Oh, I like that one.
But also, if
That's
they're like,
that's really good. It tells you a lot.
Right.
Okay.
And it's just a conversation.
I'm going to use that one.
It is a non-threatening conversation.
Yes. Okay.
It's not a review. It's just, hey, I want to know how you're doing. It's just a human conversation. And I think if we put back into leadership, it's not management and the employees. It's, we all work here. I just happen to be a little ahead of you, so I'm helping you out here. And again, when I work with my leaders, I talk a lot about servant leadership. Like, you really want a solid company, it's got to start with servant leadership. It's got to start with the leaders saying, we're here to support you and help you, because without you, none of this happens.
Right.
Like, you're going back to the beginning. Do you really want to go back to the beginning? I don't think so.
No.
So that's part of it. And then we'll talk about pay. That's always a sticky subject for people. Oh, my God, I can't pay these people. Well, I will challenge you to say you can't afford to replace them. It's cheaper to pay them than to replace them.
You're right about that, because it takes so much time to train a new employee. Months. I think, for coming on an agency, I think cutting especially the younger team members, because they come in being very green. So you're about a year. Yeah. About a year to
12
train.
Months. Onboarding is 12 months.
If they're senior, they could get it maybe, if you're lucky, in 3.
They might be producing in 3, but they're not fully integrated for 1 full year.
Yeah.
So yes, they might be producing, but the integration into your company as an integral part, it takes about 12 months. The first 3 months, they're kind of like wobbly, like, oh my God, I really don't know. Then the next 3 months, they're like, okay, I think I'm getting this. It's starting to feel like I've got my flow, but I'm still tripping on my own feet, and I'm still making mistakes, and I'm still not really sure of all the systems and processes, and I don't understand how this particular piece of software works still, and it's driving me crazy. And then 9 months, they're like, okay, I'm feeling like I'm actually doing my job with some flow and ease. And then at 12 months, they're like, okay, now, particularly younger ones, okay, now I got it. I'm good. And that's where you better be on top of them and be having that conversation of, what's going on? How are you feeling? Well, and give them the option of asking for a raise. Make it an easy conversation for them, because in those lower levels, they're the hardest ones to hire, they're the hardest ones to keep, and they're the easiest ones to solve the problem. Just give them more money.
Is that what it is?
Really that simple. At that 1 to 3 year mark, it's money. 3 years and above, money's the third thing that people leave for. But at that 1 to 3 mark, money is the number one thing they leave for. Money and title.
Yeah, they like the title, which is interesting.
Money and title. They don't want to be entry level anymore.
Yeah.
They're not. They have a year's worth of experience. They've actually done something. They actually have money in the bank account. Like, they're a grown up.
Right.
It's very exciting.
And I guess after the year or two, is that when because they're feeling more confident in things,
Yes.
that's when they maybe start thinking about, what else can I be doing? Or
Right. And if they're not feeling connected, seen, heard, appreciated, appreciation is a big one, then they go, well, I now have all this experience and I'm now trained and I now can say I'm not an entry-level person anymore. I can now go ask for $10,000 more a year somewhere else. Well, let me tell you, pay them the $10,000 more a year, because it's going to cost you $20,000 to $40,000 to replace them minimum. And if you have a mid-level person leaving, that's that 5 year and above person, 5 to 10 year person, it's almost $70,000 to replace them. And the corporate knowledge you lose too, and the reduction in production, whether it's service or actual production environment, you lose client delivery time because you have a gap and you've lost knowledge, and somebody's client may not get followed up with because somebody didn't know. And again, this is why having systems and processes also is really important, because then you know how to hand off information.
right.
There's a repository, there's a unified space, and then nobody's hoarding information either. Well, you can't fire me because I have this thing you don't have. Well, no.
Yeah, I've had that. I've seen that
Yeah, you've
before.
seen-
Like, I
I've
don't
seen-
want to tell
sure.
anybody else, because what if,
Right.
you can replace me with somebody else.
Right.
I'm going to keep it all right here, not
Right.
let it out.
And that, again, is, as the leader, as the managers, that's where that human connection really becomes important. That I'm not going to fire you. We got to have a conversation, though, and we got to exchange information. If I am going to fire you, it has nothing to do with what information you have or not.
Right.
It has to do with the fact that either we're struggling financially, you're not a fit for the company, or it's just not the right thing. Like, it's okay.
Yep.
So the more you cannot over communicate with people is really what it comes down to. And that's one of the things I work with is companies with, is communication. It's like, I communicate really well. I'm like, really? How often? How much? Well, a couple times a month. We send out a newsletter. Yeah, it's not communication.
No.
You're not even
No.
not even close.
No.
You're not even close.
Yeah. That one-on-one conversation, I think, is really helpful.
In a non-threatening, scary way. Like, do not send emails that say, hey, let's have a chat. People freak out. Oh my God, I'm getting fired. Be specific. Hey, we're going to do a monthly check-in. Would love to have a conversation. Nothing to worry about. I just want to check on you. Okay, I can show up to that meeting calm and not in a
Yes.
panic.
Right.
Of like, oh my God, what did I do? If you've ever been fired or let go, you know the feeling.
Yes.
Don't do that to your employees. Please don't do that to your employees. So that's sort of that's what we work on.
That's great. So when we were talking earlier, you had mentioned there are 5 things that companies can start thinking about, and when putting together this process. Can we start with-
I have there's a couple different ways to do it. So the 5 sort of top things that you want to look at is, what is your culture? Are you communicating, creating connection, building community, and showing care? That's why I call it my C4 culture.
Okay.
Are you doing a C4 culture? Are you communicating, creating community? Community is really important because people will show up bigger and better for something that feels bigger than themselves. If they feel that they belong to something important, that their presence and their participation is important and matters. So community is really important in a company. And not just insular community, but broader outside community too, like outside in the greater world community. So building that community is really, really key. And then care. Care comes in, people are like, well, we give them lunch every week. That's great perk. That's not culture. Culture is, do people know who to talk to if they have a problem? Do they feel empowered to make a decision? Do they feel like if they make the wrong decision, they may be corrected, but they're not going to be destroyed?
Right.
Creating, because again, I work with a lot of tech companies and innovation is a big piece of it. Well, innovation only comes when there's room for failure. So creating a space where there's care, where they feel supported, they feel heard, they feel seen, they feel like they have the opportunity to fail, to make mistakes, to take risks, that's really huge. And then again, I'll go back to communication because you cannot communicate too much. So that's sort of number one.
Right.
And then number two would be making sure that your processes that you have written down and shared, your processes for hiring, keep it simple. Like seriously, keep it simple. If it is not a management or higher level interview or position, it should be 2 interviews or less. Empower your hiring managers to make decisions. Review your retention plans. Do you have a retention plan? If you are like, what is a retention plan? Chances are you do not. That would be a good place to start, right there. And then, do you have a plan? Do you know how to handle the transition of someone leaving, whether they're promoted, whether they're leaving voluntarily, or whether they're being asked to leave? It doesn't matter. You need to know how to handle that transition like a human with another human, because we've all watched it in the news. The layoffs this last year were abysmal, and there were companies who did a beautiful job of it and companies who did a horrific job of it.
I know I heard a lot of people from one of the big tech companies, they all got an email saying,
At
don't
4
come
in
back
the morning, and they locked them out of all their systems and dropped their key codes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is just, actually, there were 3. There were 3 big tech companies that did that. 3 of them. It was horrible, horrible. And then there were other companies who did it beautifully, and they did it with humility and with a kind heart and humanity. They put humanity in it. So again, as a company leader, these are people's livelihoods. This isn't just something they do for fun. They do this because it makes them a living, and they're doing it for you. So I challenge leaders, really, maybe the last thing would be I really challenge leaders to check in with their mindset about their employees. And I always say to my leaders, what are you doing to be a better leader every day? What development work are you doing on yourself? Because improvement in your company starts with you. And so, that's sort of where a lot of what I end up doing is leadership and executive coaching, because they're like, HR is the problem, or sales is the problem, or this team is the problem.
Yeah.
I'm always like, okay, we're going to start there. But chances are that's just the symptom. The problem is starting all the way at the top.
Right.
Because the culture is bleeding down in a way that isn't matching the alignment of vision and mission and core values. So personal development for the leader, and then really know your company core values and share them. Share them. Because again, it creates that community. It helps you communicate. It makes them feel connected to something bigger and greater than themselves, and that's really important. So that's where I would start with that. I have a free resource. It's called 5 Questions to Review Your Hiring Retention Process. I'd be happy to share that with your audience.
Yes, I think they would love that.
Okay.
We can add the link into the show notes where they can get that information.
Absolutely.
Along with information on how to contact you.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you.
Because I think you are somebody that every company needs.
Well, thank you. I do too.
Whether you're a startup company and you want to develop those processes before you start hiring, or you're like me, I've been doing this for a long time, but you realize that you've come to terms with the fact that something's got to change in order to make this work the next time around.
Right. There was a better way.
Yes, there was always a better way. So that there's that person. And then there's those companies, like you said, the larger companies that are really looking to scale. And it sounds like you can go like all the way up.
Well, I always tell people it's like start the way you want to end, build to scale, and it's never too late to course correct. So that pretty much covers all three areas.
Yes, that does. That's good. You said it better than I did.
That's all right. I practiced a few times.
It's never too late to course correct.
No.
So
No,
that's
it's
good.
never. And again, if you can simplify, I always tell my leaders this too. It's not just about making it better for your employees. It makes it better for you,
I see that.
right?
From everything that you said, I can see how life would be a lot better.
Right. Because you can empower your mid-level managers to make decisions and take the day-to-day responsibilities and allow you to go back to doing what you do really well as the founder and the visionary. Vision. Be strategic. Go out and talk to the next level of business that you want to be in. But you know your business will run itself because you've put the processes in place, you've put the right people in place, and you've empowered them to do their job. That's a big one. People are like, well, I have to still manage. No, let them do their job. Yes, you get to make the hard decisions, and you get to make the fun decisions. That's both. The hard decisions do land at the top. But at the end of the day, if you have your people working with you and not just for you, it makes a big difference in where you can go.
I love that. I think that's great advice. Thank you so much. I think this was so valuable for so many of us. I really appreciate you being on Learning Curves
Well,
today.
thank you so much for having me. It was fun.
And thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time on Learning Curves.
Second Soul Studios is a full-service production studio with capabilities for photo, video, podcasting, editing, co-working, and more. Our photo-video studio has a number of different backdrop choices and props to choose
Our
from.
team at CEA
We
has
also have
tons of
gourmet
experience
kitchen
and
sets,
top-notch
or
training,
digital
which
upstart
helps
lounge.
you take all the stress and confusion out of marketing your own business. After years of working with large companies like Pulte Homes and Metro Places, we guarantee the successful implementation of a marketing strategy.